My talk today is going to be in 5 small parts, obviously, with the time limit. I give a brief history of the central Mashhad, and then the reasons which were necessary for our proposal of an urban renewal of the city center, and what came of our proposals, and finally our conclusion. The history of Mashhad is, the city of Mashhad is an offshoot of the ancient city of Tus and owes its historical importance to the burial place and shrine of the Caliph Harun al-Rashid, who died in 809 CE, and that of Imam Reza, the 8th Imam of the 12 Shiite, who died 9 years later. Sorry.
There you
go. Yes. In spite of severe attacks of the Mongols in 1220, the sacred monuments were partly spared. Shah Rukh, the son of the conquering Tamerlane, carried out considerable renovation and improvements, while his wife ordered the construction of Masjid Gohar Shad, which is considered one of the finest architectural monuments of the Islamic period. A blue faience dome that was rebuilt with poured concrete in the 1960s surmounts the southern Aywan. 2 round minarets that rise from the ground flanking the southern Aywan constitute an innovation in architecture, as minarets in Iran were previously positioned above the parapets. In the 16th and 17th centuries, Mashhad was once more sacked by the Turkomans and the Uzbeks. Shah Abbas I encouraged pilgrimage to this city and carried out much restoration. Nader Shah made Mashhad his capital city and added a number of buildings. The situation of the central Mashhad by the middle of the 20th century had become rather chaotic, and a development of slum conditions and so on. And this was the reason that we decided, without having been commissioned to do so, we actually proposed an urban renewal scheme, which we financed the basic original part ourselves, and we proposed this to the government. And despite of this, we had lots and ups and downs before it could be accepted. The surrounding parts were very unhygienic, and the buildings were in very bad condition. This is Mashhad of beginning of the 20th century, around the shrine of Imam Reza. So you see that the conditions surrounding the Imam Reza shrine were never very glorious, in fact. sorry, this is very disturbing, but this is the central Mashhad in mid-20th century. In fact, at the time that we started our proposal. And the ring that you see around the shrine was made by Reza Shah, and it became part and parcel of the whole central Mashhad, which included the 4 cross streets, which are the main, and still are the main arteries of the city, and I will get on to it, how they have created such huge problems in recent years. I'm going to give you a brief run-through of our proposal. Our proposal included a huge research program. We had 50 people, specialists in various fields of demography, architecture, urban planning, sociology, economy, etc., etc. And we pinpointed every single structure around the shrine of Imam Reza, and we analyzed everything finally, and the things that you're going to see from here on are in fact the results of our analysis. And just as an example to show that maybe what we foresaw was quite accurate, on top is the real population growth of Mashhad, and at the bottom, 20 years before, this was our projection of the population, which you see is almost exactly the same as what has happened. This is a map of population density and that is the area surrounding the Mashhad, central Mashhad, that we actually studied. And this is the existing land use of that area, converted to various percentages. Building ownership was, when we started the project, we thought most of the buildings belonged to Astana Woods, but we were very surprised. Sorry, I'm terribly sorry. Thank you very much for saying. This is the, and we thought most of the land belonged to Astana Woods, whereas it didn't actually. Most of the land was private. This is the life of the buildings, and this shows very clearly in what a bad state of upkeep that the area around the shrine was, because you see more than 56% of the buildings were for immediate demolition, in fact. This is a commercial analysis of the area with various usages such as banks, foods, carpets, etc., etc. And this is an analysis of the various shops that existed around the area, their number, and also the number of employees. Well, never mind. What can I do? In the end, I have to sacrifice myself for Imam Reza. And these are the number of workshops in the vicinity and hotels. Of course, I'm saying hotels. They were mostly musafirkhane and in extremely bad conditions. And the gradings that you see at the bottom, they're not four-star hotels or anything. It was a special grading that they did, that the Shahdari did, especially for this area. Now, having done all this research, two or three things became extremely clear for us. The most important thing was that there was a huge socioeconomic force on this central area of Mashhad for construction, business, tourism, pilgrims, etc., etc. And this was the big force which constituted the essence of our design and our proposal, in fact. Now, out of the research that we had done, we came to a very simple conclusion that you see there's the central ring, which is the area of the sacred buildings. Surrounding that, we proposed a sort of a peripheral buildings, which in some places they were connected to the shrine area, because a lot of the reason for this was that in the Islamic central areas around the Jamia Mosque or in places like this, usually the bazaars, there's some sort of central area usages which always go with these religious centers. And in our proposal, we wanted to keep this principle and this idea and have that. So we had a ring of buildings, in fact. And then in order to protect what I will show later, and you'll see, in order to protect the sort of the invasion of the central area through the socioeconomic factors, we proposed the green belt outside of our proposed buildings, and then the gray area surrounding the green belt is an area that we proposed that there were mixed use commercial and business usages should be encouraged there, with height limits for the buildings only, so that they wouldn't overcome physically the character of the shrine. Now, the second most important problem of the central Mashhad is exactly these crossroads, which in fact culminate to the haram. And we proposed two underpasses for this area, and one underpass which handled the cross traffic, the transit traffic, and another side which culminated in the haram area only and into underground parkings. And the whole of that area, the green, yellow, and the central part, would in fact become absolutely pedestrian. And the traffic, whether transit or whether culminating in the Haram area, would go underneath, with plenty of parkings underneath. And there again, I'll show you later how this has not been achieved now and the problems that they have right now. Now, this is the Haram area parking, Haram area traffic, which it culminated into a central road, and there were parkings under the buildings themselves, and also they could be expanded in the green area that we had foreseen in the future, and without causing any problem, and they could expand as the requirement went on. This is the result of our proposal. In other words, you see the buildings in the center. There's the central part, of course, are the mosques, Mashhad Mosque, Haram, and the other buildings. And there were certain crossings which you see are the connections to these. And then the ring around it is a number of stories of buildings in a way to engulf the classical buildings, because we envisaged all the time that the problem, there's the connecting of those areas with the rest of Mashhad would always be a problematic thing, and the forces would infringe eventually on the central area. And this is a plan, and you see in the center there is a pedestrian walkway going all the way around with connections at various levels. And so the whole area would, in fact, become a pedestrian walking place. This is our model of the area. You'll see how our buildings surrounded the shrine area, sort of framed. We planned in a way to frame that area. And the cross-section at the bottom, we especially put that to show that the levels of the heights of our buildings in no way interfere with the heights of the actual classical buildings. This is the new Mashhad museum and library that we designed, that unfortunately the actual library exists, but the facade doesn't exist anymore. And we spent more than a year studying the facade in order to make a modern building which harmonized with the surroundings of the shrine. And this was, in fact, a small section of the internal ring that we had proposed. In other words, we had foreseen that the internal ring would be of more or less this type of architecture. Now, this is a monument. This has nothing to do with the actual shrine area project, but this was a monument that we built in Mashhad, and it was there until a couple of years ago. And finally, a couple of years ago, they decided to demolish it. And they made various excuses of why they demolished that. And they replaced it with this iron fairy that you see at the bottom. So it is not only that ancient monuments are getting destroyed in Iran, but even modern monuments are being destroyed in some ways. Now, we had divided the area into 4 phases of construction. I hope I'm not over too much. I'll try to go very quickly. 4 phases of construction, and we had planned it in a way to try and create as little as problem as we could for the people who had businesses there or residences there, etc. And consequently, we were going to start in a very small area and then transfer the population of a bigger area to that, and so on, and we would continue to do so. Unfortunately, this phasing of our program didn't work, and just a few years before the revolution, the Naib Tawliya and Ustandar of Mashhad, who was Mr. Valian at the time, they decided that they're going to just knock everything down surrounding the monuments. And then Mr. Valian told me one of these days, well, I don't know how long I'm going to be staying as Ostandar here, but I'll knock it down and maybe somebody else can come and rebuild it. And anyway, the knocking down was done, and then the revolution came, and this was the situation just before the revolution. I wasn't going to talk about the internal side of the haram, etc., but judging by some of the speakers who have talked about this, and I think this is interesting to let you know, is that this is the inside of the haram, which is absolutely changed. There's almost nothing of the existing haram exists anymore. And a lot of the buildings in the haram area, haram itself and the Gohar Shad and other buildings, surrounding buildings, a lot of the old tile works are changed, the new tile work has replaced them, etc., unfortunately. And this is the Mashhad city center as it is today. They have built huge sands or courtyards around the shrine, and these are so huge, and the surrounding walls with mosaic decoration are so overwhelming and so overdone that the Masjid Gohar Shad and the haram is just a minute thing over there. This is an aerial view of the same thing, and you see at the bottom there's a ring there, and that is where they have taken the roads underneath. Now, the problem that they have encountered is that they have only partially executed our project. And that is that they have mixed the cross-traffic with the traffic that culminates to the haram. And they've built 3 or 4 parkings underneath, and they've closed 3 of them because there's been such a huge traffic congestion that we had foreseen that they have had to actually close the parkings. And these are the loops that you see. And even physically, they're so huge, and they've exaggerated these in such a way that they overwhelm the other buildings of the area. And this is a good picture of, you see how dramatic this tunnel entrance, in fact, which would only be a simple tunnel entrance. They've made a huge feature of it, and you'll see how the traffic, the people, and so on are all mixed up together. This is the congested parking which goes, and the traffic area which goes underneath. And this is one of the roads that leads to the, this place. And you see that the hodgepodge of construction, there's nothing which matches another thing. And it's just mushroom growth. And this was exactly what we feared, and unfortunately it happened. And that's why we put that green belt around, so that this wouldn't happen. And you see, they haven't managed to separate the traffic and the pedestrians. Consequently, and this was, I've taken some of these photographs a couple of weeks ago when Mashhad was very calm in the pilgrimage periods and so on and so forth. You just can't move either by car or on foot. And you see, these are the surroundings of the haram. Various buildings are just getting up. As I said, this socioeconomic situation is so strong that this is what's happening. And the parkings which are closed and which are not sufficient. Consequently, there's parkings like this all around the haram area. This shows how crowded it gets, and so on and so forth. And this is the great courtyard or sand that they have built. And for some reason or the other, they carpet it as well on occasions. So I thought, as a last gesture, I just put red carpets for you as your entrance to this area. Thank you very much.